about the risks, or are there any risks associated with pornography? Many times people say pornography is harmless fun. I'm watching, so I'm not harming anybody. And yet, pornography by nature is destructive, demeaning, desensitizing, and exploitative. First of all, let me just say that pornography is not about two loving people engaged in a sexual act. This is an industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So the people who are viewed there, they are not necessarily enjoying the sexual act. There are people who have come here, they're having sex, they are being paid, they have been conditioned, they have been coached, even in terms of the sounds to make. So to begin with, it introduces a distortion of what, sex is all about. So when we talk about it being destructive, it actually destroys relationships. Now, before I even get to marital relationships, many times, because this is something somebody does privately, you will find that their social skills are hampered because they have to isolate. Even in a family, I usually tell parents that when you notice that your child is secluding themselves from the family, they are staying in their room or in a private place, you may just need to investigate. Why? Because this behavior is pointing to something. So first of all, people isolate so that they can spend time watching pornography. And because it's addictive, they will keep on wanting more and more, spending more and more time, and this is destructive. I cannot tell you how many marriages that I have personally experienced that have broken as a result of pornography addiction, mainly by one of the partners. And as we have said, men are more affected because men are visual. Now, I said that pornography is a multi-billion-dollar industry. People spend money on the internet, getting the gadgets that they're using, and this definitely affects people in terms of their finances because they spend a lot of money. Now, because of the time that is spent watching pornography, we have, if the people are in school, maybe they are children, they are students, you find that their grades are going down because they are spending more time watching pornography than studying. Work, a lot of time is lost when people get into pornography. In fact, there are many organizations that have blocked certain sites because they realize that employees are spending time watching pornographic content as opposed to being at work at that point. Now, this means that pornography is quite destructive to relationships and even to the individual who is watching because they are spending their money and they are not able to give it their all when it comes to work or when it comes to school. Pornography is demeaning. When somebody is watching the pornographic act, the female most of the time is objectified. They are used as an object of sexual pleasure. And it's like their worth, their value is in terms of what they can offer, the pleasure they can offer to the other person. And yet, all of us, we are created being mental, being physical, being spiritual, and you can say sexual, emotional beings. But pornography looks at only that aspect of sexuality. And then, pornography is also desensitizing. It desensitizes somebody because many of the pornographic acts are violent. So somebody begins to associate sexual acts with violence. And they feel like even as they have sex, they can actually be violent as well, and that gives pleasure. That is a twisted way of desensitizing a human being. Pornography is also exploitative, particularly when we talk about child pornography. It is exploitative, and pornography has actually been linked to sex trafficking. Many of the actors in pornography, especially the females, they are victims of sex trafficking. And so when you look at all those facts and all those factors, it is not harmless fun because it's damaging to the person watching and even ultimately to the other people, to the loved ones. It damages them because it denies them the interaction, the connection that they would have with this person, and by, them experiencing this person in their lives. So we have physiological effects that are associated with pornography. Watching pornography or viewing pornographic content being addictive, it affects the pleasure and the reward center of the brain. So as somebody is watching the images, they release a chemical called dopamine. And this is the chemical that is released when somebody is addicted even to drugs and to alcohol. So they watch, the chemical is released, they feel very good about it. And so they want to watch more and more, and they want to keep on releasing. And so this affects, actually changes the brain. That's a word that I want to use. Watching pornography changes the brain. So when brain scans are done of people who are addicted to pornography and people who are addicted to drugs, and even those who are addicted to food, because food is also another addiction that affects the pleasure and the reward center of the brain, there are changes that are observed at the level of the brain because of the watching of pornographic content or even the addiction, which inadvertently the watching of pornography leads to addiction because of stimulating the brain and releasing the chemical that is called dopamine. What is masturbation? Masturbation is self-pleasuring. This is whereby somebody manipulates their sexual organs to get to the point of sexual excitement and even orgasm. It may be by use of hand, or by use of objects, or by use of surfaces. But the bottom line is that they are self-stimulating, self-gratifying, so that they can have the excitement, and even it leads to orgasm. So are there any risks attached to masturbation? I'm consciously aware that even as I tackle this topic, there's so much literature out there. There are so many stories out there, and this is a very controversial topic that I know that I'm on. However, I'm just going to give it from the scientific, from the psychological, from the emotional aspect, what I have read, what I have studied, and even what I've experienced among the clients that I've been working with. Now, let's begin with what sex is all about. Intimacy, let me just say that, because ultimately people are seeking for intimacy. Intimacy is not just about sex. Sex is actually the lowest form of intimacy. It is a culmination of people connecting intellectually, emotionally, in a leisurely way. Ultimately, then sex comes at the climax. However, when somebody engages in self-gratification, self-pleasure, or masturbation, they're actually getting to the lowest form of intimacy, okay? So, because it is about them, and yet sex is essentially not about us, but it's about us, yes, but also about our loved ones. So people are ultimately getting to that point. Yes, there are risks that are associated to masturbation, even as much as it looks like I'm not affecting anybody, it's about me, I'm not getting diseases. There are risks that are associated. One of the risks associated to masturbation is shame, toxic shame. Many people actually, or even everybody who engages in masturbation, they do it privately. I usually joke with my client, I ask them, can you walk to a public place and you say, I'm just going out to masturbate and then I'll be back? I don't think anybody would do that. So many times people do this in hiding, and it leads to toxic shame because they feel very shamed. Because anything that somebody does in hiding is like there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong that I'm doing. And then, because remember, as we talked about intimacy, saying that sex eventually is at the end, is at the tail end, with masturbation itself, pleasure, and they're pleasuring, somebody pleasures themselves, they orgasm, they ejaculate, or something like that. So what happens is that they train their bodies to respond just like this, very fast. So ultimately, if people get into relationships with somebody with a romantic partner, and they're in the process of also giving pleasure to the person, even as they give to themselves, they have conditioned their bodies to climax very fast. I cannot tell you how many couples I'm working with and I've worked with who are struggling with scenarios whereby the partner, especially the men, they're having a premature ejaculation. And this has been linked, they confess that they masturbated for many years, a lot of time. So you will find they are not able to satisfy their partner because of premature ejaculation. Masturbation leads to isolation because people need to retreat privately for them to engage in masturbation. And of course, because of the addictive nature, they will require more and more time. And definitely this affects their work, productivity at work. It also even affects output when it comes to studies for those who are students, because it begins very early as children or teenagers begin experimenting, with their sexual feelings and with their bodies. Then we also have exhaustion of sexual energies. Because in essence, what is happening, somebody is mortgaging or they are borrowing sexual energy that would have been used in the future. Currently, and you can find this out, there are a lot of sales when it comes to sex-enhancing drugs. Because you will find people have engaged in not just masturbation, but in a lot of other unhealthy sexual behaviors to the point that at the time that they require the sexual energies, they don't have them. So they begin using sex-enhancing drugs very earlier on, and of course, these have side effects, especially when they're used over the counter, non-prescription. And then we also have damage of social relationships. We have damage of social relationships. As I said earlier on, we have marriages that are straining, marriages that are struggling because of premature ejaculation, and this is compounded when we have the affected partner in toxic shame, when they're having them shamed, so they find it very difficult to reach out for help. So pornography and masturbation as expressions of unhealthy sexuality, one of the underlying themes that we have seen is isolation and shame. Studies show that we are wired for human connection. And even as we connect, there is a saying that says neurons that fire together, wire together. So we get influenced positively and even negatively as we interact with other people. So as somebody isolates, to feed into this ever-increasing need of watching more and more pornographic content, of indulging more and more in self-gratification, they feel hopeless, they feel depressed because they are essentially on their own. The neurons are not wiring and firing together with others. They are not benefiting from the power of human connection. And so yes, ultimately this affects the individual even as much as it affects the other people who are denied of the human connection that this other person would have provided by interacting more with them. Is there hope for anybody struggling with masturbation or pornography? Yes, there is hope. Usually, people begin watching pornography or masturbation either out of pleasure or pain. And this is what I mean. Pleasure maybe because they have heard, they have read, they have experienced, and they are curious. They just want to find out how does it feel. So that is about pleasure. We have another category of people who get into pornography and masturbation because of this an emotional pain. There's an emotional need that they have. And as we say, the exposure begins from 11 years. Usually even in my own work, I have found that children who get into pornography, it's because they don't feel a human connection in their families. They feel isolated because of maybe the family is struggling with something. They are not feeling heard. They are not feeling seen. They are not being felt. So they get into this because pornography gives a sense of fantasy. Somebody feels that they are always wanted, because that is what the images show, that somebody wants sex and they are embraced by this person. So ultimately, it's getting into a fantasy world. So we cannot just address pornography and masturbation looking at the habit. We need to look at the root cause. I have seen in many quarters when people are dealing with it, especially with younger people, particularly students, they want to punish. Punishing does not help because this is somebody who is already struggling. What they need is to be embraced and to be supported, because punishing is like a way of shaming. Now, before I go to the step-by-step process, because it's something that I lead people every day, I just want to share a story. I was speaking among college university students. There were many colleges, many universities, and I was talking to them. And as I finished talking to them about pornography, masturbation, I asked if anybody would like help. So I thought that as I went to a private room, that is when somebody would come. But this young man stood up from the crowd and he walked to the front. And I asked whether he understood what I was asking for. He said yes. And he said, "Can we talk?" So we immediately went privately, and this is the story that he gave me. He told me that he did very well from the village where he grew up, and he was admitted to a national school in the city. And he was a top student. He had been taught family values, maybe not to the extent that he expected, but the parents had family values that they had transmitted or communicated to him. So during the time that he was on holiday, he would go to visit the uncle. That's where he would spend the holiday. And there at the uncle's place, he was alone most of the time because the uncle and his wife, they were working. So you can see already there was a need for connection. He wasn't with a family, and he would be alone most of the time at the uncle's place. I think his children were older. So one time after he had finished his studies and he was just there hanging around, a neighbor, a boy from the neighborhood came and said, here is a video, would you like to watch? So he took the video and he watched, and it was pornographic content. And to use his words, he said, and that marked a downward slopey road. He watched that one and he wanted another, and this other young man gave him more and more. He watched and watched and watched. He struggled through school. He did well. He was admitted to a public university. Now in university, he had access because he had his own room. And he would watch pornography, engage in masturbation. He wasn't going to class. He wasn't participating much in social activities. He told me he didn't have friends and he had no desire whatsoever to get into a romantic relationship. And so he was reaching out to me, particularly because of the effects that he was feeling. Like he wanted to be alone. He didn't have a desire for romantic relationships, and even relating with these other friends, he wasn't able to relate with them. And now his grades were going down because anytime he's in class, he wants to go and watch pornography and masturbate. Any free time he has, even at night, he was spending so much time at night in pornography, masturbation, he wasn't getting adequate sleep. And so he told me, I don't know what you're going to do. Tell whoever you want to tell my story. I want people to hear my story so that they can get encouraged and know that they are not alone. I need help. And because this was a male child, he was a man, I felt like I wasn't the best person to walk him through the journey. So I got a male colleague who walked him through the journey. And I just want to say the story ended well because he's now recovered and he's doing very well in his relationships and his studies. And this is the step-by-step process that I want to give, that that he walked through, and many other people, male and female across the world, have walked through, and a lot of people have been helped. I haven't heard of many people that have recovered on their own. So what do I mean? Reach out for an accountability partner, reach out to a professional, reach out to a peer. Because essentially, pornography and masturbation addiction is it's something that somebody does in private, in isolation. Now, there is a saying that goes like, whatever took you there cannot get you out. So it is something that you have been doing privately in isolation. To get out, one needs a community. And I don't mean that somebody needs to stand publicly and declare or talk about it. No. A community is a tribe. It can be one, it can be two people. And that is what the young man in the story did. He reached out to one person. So when they reach out to one person, this person serves as an accountability partner. So the person helps walk the individual that is affected through the process. And even as they walk through the process, you need to be consciously aware that it is fantasy. The pornography, the masturbation, it's not real. It doesn't happen in the real world. It is in a fantasy world. So one needs to understand, because many times the fantasy is the one that leads somebody to continue, because everybody wants to feel good. Everybody wants to feel good. But life is not just about feeling good all the time. There are good moments and there are bad moments. Now, somebody needs to get off the blame game. It's very easy for one to blame themselves, because we have said pornography, masturbation leads to toxic shame. So one may blame themselves by saying, of course I do this because I'm a bad person. I do this because I'm irresponsible. I do this because I cannot amount to anything. So please do not blame yourself. Cut off the blame game. Do not blame yourself. Do not blame other people. Get off the habit of blaming other people. Like the example of the young man in the story that I gave, he could say, it's because my parents didn't facilitate me to go home for holiday. I was lonely, I was alone. It's because of the young man from the neighborhood who introduced me the very first time. That's why I did it. Blame does not help. take full responsibility for the choices that you have made and say, I did what I did with what I had. Now I know better. I'm going to do better. So no deflecting responsibility to other people. You take full responsibility of your choices, your actions, and where it has led you to. As you do this, avoid negative self-talk. You may hear a lot of voices. Sometimes you may hear, oh, maybe you have read, you have listened to a video or something, and then you hear that people who have struggled with pornography, masturbation, they struggle in relationships, even in marital relationships. You need to get off that negative self-talk and tell yourself that you can heal, you can do better, and you can be better. So you speak positively to yourself. Now, whichever gadgets that you were using, that somebody was using for pornography especially, they may need to give away the gadget. I have talked to people who have actually decided to get rid of their laptop. They got rid of their tablet, their iPad. They got rid of their smartphones because you must cut the connection. You know, this is an addiction. It's like saying that when you remain with that gadget you are using, it's like saying that you are recovering from alcohol and then you live on top of a bar or you live next to a bar. So every day you are walking to your house, you're seeing people drinking. Of course, you're likely to get back into the habit. Or you go with a friend to the bar, you say, you know, I'll take a soft drink. I mean, it's very difficult because this is an addiction. So you may want for some time to get rid of whatever gadget that you were using. You might want to put trackers, block the sites, and have somebody monitor the trackers so that they can say, where were you that time? And this is the accountability partner that we talked about so that you can keep on talking to them. Let me say that we can always retrain our brain because we said ultimately these addictive processes, they affect the brain. But thankfully, we have neuroplasticity and we have neurogenesis. And this is what I mean. Neuroplasticity is whereby we rewire our brains up to the time that we die because our brains are malleable, just like clay. So they have been rewired in this way because of the addictive process. Our brains can be rewired differently when we begin doing things differently. That is neuroplasticity. Neurogenesis is whereby we can develop new neurons, new nerve cells because of the new practices and experiences that we are having. And now, because we said pornography and masturbation is about a need, an emotional need for human connection that somebody is seeking, that is why in the first place they got into it, you need to replace the habit. Habits cannot be removed, they cannot be eradicated or killed, but they can be replaced. So you need to replace the habit. You need to ask, when are the moments that I feel like watching a pornographic video or I feel like engaging in masturbation? You may need to ask, when do I feel like that? There's what we call HALT, H-A-L-T. Is it when I'm hungry? Is it when I'm angry? Is it when I'm lonely? Is it when I'm tired? I want to repeat that one. Ask yourself, when do I feel like watching pornography or masturbation? Use the acronym HALT, HALT. Is it when I'm hungry? Is it when I'm angry? Angry? Is it when I'm lonely? Is it when I'm tired? So many people are able to see, usually it's one of those. So if it's when I'm hungry, you may want to ask, how can I schedule my meal time so that then I can eat maybe food at the right time that is going to release energy slowly so that I don't get so hungry? If it's when you're angry, you may want to ask, why am I angry? Is it that I need to speak up more? Is it that my boundaries are being violated and I'm not speaking up? Why? Why the anger? If it's loneliness, do I need to connect more with people? Can I call a friend? Can I reach out to somebody? Because at this point you need to talk. So you are medicating. When you need to talk, when somebody needs to talk, so maybe they are medicating with pornography or masturbation. If it's about tiredness, do I need to do self-care? Do I need to recharge? What do I need to do? So when you interrogate yourself that way, you then find ways of replacing that habit. Because if you want to just stop the habit with no replacement, that may not really work in the long term, because somebody may find themselves relapsing. And relapse is real. Just like any addictive process, relapse is real. So it is possible to relapse. However, keep going. Be consciously aware. Practice self-compassion. Self-care, self-compassion. You say, okay, I have relapsed, but now I know better. I will do better. In other words, using the energy of the relapse as fuel. Using it as fuel so that you can do better next time. I want to say that there is hope. Nobody is so badly damaged that they cannot experience results, positive results, sometimes even within a very short time. There is no shame in reaching out for help. In case you have listened today and you realize that you're struggling, you need help, or you know somebody who may need help, please share the link, share the video, leave a comment below, and we are going to get back to you. The beauty is that now there is so much help available, even at the comfort of your own home. Sometimes I have clients reaching out to me and they say, I need help, but I don't want you to see my face. And so we use a means in which I don't see their face, but they get helped. And indeed they say, you have helped me across the world. I've not seen their face, they haven't seen my face, and they have been helped. So I just want to say that the same way probably you have watched this and you have realized somebody or yourself you need help, help is at hand. And you can be helped, you can rewire your brain, you can do better. And remember, a healed body is stronger than a body that never got sick. So for you who has been struggling and who is going to get better, you will actually get physically, emotionally stronger, much more sometimes than even somebody who has ever struggled with what we are talking about.